Greetings. This is a time of crisis and a time to emphasize human rights. It is time to reconsider the benefits that human rights measures can provide in preventing greater harm, repairing the harm done, and building back better, more resilient systems in the future. It is a time to reboot our fundamental commitment that regardless of political or economic system, people's human rights should form the basis of policy. And it is an opportunity to shape coalitions and partnerships that can drive that work starting now. Who is being worst affected by COVID-19? Poor people, more likely to live and work in conditions which make it impossible to shield from the virus. Members of racial, ethnic, and religious minority whose rights are already abstracted and denied. Indigenous people, older people, especially those housed in collective care homes where the rights and dignity of each individual may not be fully upheld. People with disabilities, detainees, and all too often the burden of caring for the sick and the job losses linked to the COVID-19 recession are being borne by women and girls. In other words, peoples whose voices are silenced and whose interests are rarely served by the political and economic processes in their societies, are those who are worst harmed by the medical and social impact of COVID-19. Even before COVID-19, progress towards the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was flagging, and we in the humanitarian community were seeing the results of that failure to invest in resilience every day. Now, in areas already hard hit by conflict, where the meager health facilities are being attacked again and again by belligerents, where displaced people are crammed into camps with inadequate sanitation, COVID-19 adds to the burdens of war and poverty. For those suffering families, for many indigenous people and other communities already buckling under critical environmental damage, and for the humanitarian staff who work to protect and assist them, the pandemic is a crashing blow. Coupled with the growing climate catastrophe, it is adding new tensions, more threats of displacement, and the risk of sharper local and regional conflicts. In other words, there is a strong likelihood that the pandemic will generate even greater humanitarian needs at a time when many in the international community are shrinking their engagement with international cooperation and assistance. A crisis of this complexity, which simultaneously hits almost every country in the world, is something we have rarely dealt with. I see two clear lessons. One, the harm being done by this virus is powered by long-term failures to uphold human rights. To effectively counter the damage, we must address these root causes. Two, the need for solidarity has never been so clear. We live on one planet. Just as our problems are shared, so must our solutions be devised and carried out. Working together, we can build back better paradigms in which global solidarity is seen as a value in the interest of every state, and progress towards universal health care, universal social protection, freedom of movement, and other fundamental human rights are seen not as costs, but as investments in justice for all. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres recently called for a new social contract, and I quote him, to ensure economic and social justice and respect for human rights, end of quote. All of us here today need to meet this moment to take a stand in favor of rebuilding societies and economies that uphold the dignity, equality, and rights of every person. Because, as we can now all see very plainly, that is in everyone's interest. Because it is the right thing to do. Because it's the smart, effective thing to do. And because it acknowledges the reality of our shared vulnerability, our shared humanity, and our shared future. Your deliberations at this forum can help turn the tide and forge new and effective global partnerships. Thank you for standing up for human rights.